Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're about to see the first Streets of New Capenna Chord-o-class for the season. These are weekly group classes that I hold with members of my Patreon, talking about cards, talking about the format, talking about big picture level up topics. You're going to hear from not just me, but a bunch of group discussion from people in that class. Hopefully give some framing for the format, some early thoughts. I post these on YouTube for everybody to see, but I do think there's a lot of value in being in the class, and if you'd like to join these classes after you watch these, you can check out the link in the description of the Patreon. There's a tier there to join the classes. And yeah, hope you have fun. All right, well, welcome to Chord-o-class number 6 in the first Streets of New Capenna Chord-o-class. Welcome. We have a pretty large crowd today. We're doing a class on Streets of New Capenna early takes and card evaluation. So this is going to be kind of just a preliminary class because I know a lot of people, not everybody has gone to pre-release or played the cards or even seen all of the cards. So we've got a kind of a mixed bag of people at different engagement levels with the set so far. So this is really going to be, one, a way to kind of get people acquainted with the whole set, and two, just kind of a way to let everybody here kind of air out some thoughts about this, about the set and, you know, their experiences so far. So, all right, here's our agenda today. So we have a short intro. We have a group discussion, a breakout activity, and a regroup and a wrap up. Not too much today. We might get into 2 group activities if we have time, but there's only, you know, if we don't have time, if we go over, we'll just have our main one, and yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, so first up, I want to get a lay of the land here. No magic pun intended. I mean, I guess I said it, so I guess magic pun intended. Hands up if you have watched a set review or looked at the set yourself. All right. Cool. So I think the majority of people here. Okay, cool. And then past that, hands up if you went to a pre-release. Anybody here? I know there's only been really a small opportunity for pre-release, but nobody? Okay, cool. Nobody just yet. That's okay. That's actually, I think, even better for what we're doing today. So let's just dive in from there. So yeah, I think that really helps us just to go like, okay, well, we're kind of all on the same page then, if most of us have seen a set review, not been to a pre-release. Okay, so I want today, actually, I think often the pre-release season is inundated with a bunch of, you know, content creator thoughts, you know? Oh, sorry, one more here. Content creator thoughts. It's all, everybody's, you know, listening to the set reviews and watching streams and, you know, maybe even participating in, you know, Discord conversations. I want to hear just a little bit about what people think of the set. Just doesn't have to be from a strategic standpoint. Well, mostly strategic, but, you know, it doesn't have to be a specific take. But any big picture thoughts anybody has? Any initial takes? Maybe you do have a burning take that you're like, I feel very strongly about this set. I'd just like to hear from everybody anything they have on their mind.
Mentioned in your chat that most of the monocolored commons are extremely below power level.
Yeah.
And that kind of dismayed me, and at first I was like, this could just be a gigantic mess with a lot of fixing, especially.
Yep.
That's kind of my first thought. I'm sure they figured out how to make the lack of fixing work for that, but that dismayed me, I suppose.
Yeah, and then of course it's weird because there's also just the 2 like busted, you green and white. There's the Overseer and the Jewel Thief. They're just like really strange power level outliers in a sea of kind of medium commons otherwise. So yeah, that's a good point. And then you also mentioned a slight lack of fixing, which it's kind of interesting now the deck lists are actually kind of rolling in. I'm not sure how much everybody has seen those or paying attention, but from some pre-releases, I've seen some on Discord where I think that you know, there was an initial lack of fixing looking at the set. Maybe this is just a aspect of sealed or a function of sealed, but you know, you have more packs in sealed, but it has seemed to me like people have enough fixing. They're not just like, you know, putting, you know, a bunch of basics in their decks to cast their cards. So we'll see how that pans up for draft, but yeah, for sure. Anybody else?
I guess number one reaction for me was just like, new Magic set, this looks fun.
Yes, I think that's everybody's reaction.
I have not actually played like cons or shards, so you know the like full, you know, 3-color set is a little different for me. But I'm actually, I don't know. I've been really focused in on the monocolored commons, kind of the opposite. Not that what I think what Scott said isn't true. Like that they do look a little anemic in some ways, but I think that like finding the value there so that you can start off in one color or an allied color pair and then have a lot more flexibility in the draft seems like a very powerful option. So that's sort of where I've been like trying to find some value.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the truth is kind of going to probably lie somewhere in between of what, you're what we're saying here in Scott's take too. So, I mean, Zach, is there anything that you feel like, you're saying you're looking at the monocolor comments aside from the two Busto ones?
Yeah, so
ones
there's the obvious
out?
busted stuff for sure. I find like I really, really like some of the like package of aggressive red and black stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like the virus beetle here might be stronger than the virus beetle in Neon Dynasty.
Yep.
I saw a deck Jason posted from the pre-release that just had like 4 of them.
Yeah.
And a ton of sacrifice effects, and I just thought like that looks brutal, especially if people are exiling a card just for fixing.
Yep. Yeah, by the way, we're just talking about, for those maybe who don't know the entire set just yet, it's almost exactly Virus Beetle, except it's not an artifact. And
Corrupt Court Official.
Yes, Corrupt Court Official, that's
say
it.
the real names.
No, yeah, that's actually a good point that I didn't even think of. For today, probably best to try to say names if we can. Take the content creator role of try to say the name, try to say what the card does, and like I know that's even hard for the person who's talking about the card. I'm not like gonna be draconian about it or anything, but just like just if you can, more words probably better for our first week here. But no, I totally agree.
Busted commons we were talking about earlier: Inspiring Overseer and Jewel Thief.
That's it. That's exactly it. I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think so. This leads me to another question that I hope I remember. But I think that for those who haven't played with a 3-color set before, one of the key features often of a 3-color set or the trajectory of how it goes is people play all the colors week 1. They're playing their 3-color decks, their 4 or 5-color decks. And then the good cards, just like we see in, most sets, are like the good cards start to dry up in packs. Then people go, let's see if we can build a streamlined 2-color deck. And often that exists, right? And I think even more so, I think it's kind of planted in this set. People, they want you to draft 2-color decks at some point here. So I think, a good red-black aggressive deck, a good green-white aggressive deck. I actually don't know which one is better. I think there is kind of jury's out on my opinion on which one might actually be better. Because I think there's 2 camps for like the small aggro creature, go wide kind of stuff, and the sacrifice stuff. Both those could be pretty good. So I think often those do come to the forefront of the format after a few weeks, and I think it's actually really good to take note of those small aggro packages. Let me ask another question here to everybody who has played a 3-color set before.
Does a Korea count?
Yeah, Korea can count. It was a adjacent 3-color set, I will say. Yeah, Duncan. Okay.
I played Shards of Alar.
Cool. Yeah. So you know, luckily, I mean, you lived through the dark ages then of of not great mana fixing, and for those who have not played Shards of Alara, we didn't get we got 1 cycle of lands that common, but then they gave like this like clunky mana rock. It was like a manoliths that only tapped the 3 colors of their shard, and people were just playing some horrific mana bases because that's just kind of just what you had to do. So we're count yourself lucky that we live in 2022 where they actually want you to be able to cast your cards. Okay, so with that in mind, does anybody have any thoughts or questions about drafting a 3-color set? Because I know that was a big thing going into the set. Now, maybe not so much now because people have heard, the content creators and just there's more conversation out there about it. But if anybody has any residual thoughts or feelings about drafting 3-color sets or how to approach them, let's go with Lionel first.
I haven't played a 3-color set before. So my question is, were you like aiming to draft 3 colors right away? Because it sounds like from a lot of previews now that you're kind of leaning towards drafting 2 colors and an allied, and then possibly dipping into 3 colors depending on what comes up. So like I said, were you kind of right out the gate aiming to play 3 colors in the prior sets?
That's a good question. So let me just bring up the mythic spoiler here. Actually, so I think. Generally, no. In Khans of Tarkir and Shards, I guess Shards a little bit more, but in Khans of Tarkir, what you'd often want to do is you find an enemy color pair. It's actually the opposite of this because it's wedges versus Shards, but you find an enemy color pair to get into, and then you could be either Obzon or Marju if you started Blackway, for example. Very similar to how this set is set up. But the exception is if you opened a multicolor, 2 exceptions actually. You open an awesome multicolor rare, you want to probably pick that first and then pick up the fixing, or you go in thinking, I just want to draft all of the colors, right? And that's certainly something you can do as well. That's certainly a valid strategy, just picking up all the fixing, all the lands, all the, spell fixers. You could take that approach if you wanted to. But the idea, of course, is that you don't want to get too deep into a family, because if you just like a normal draft, you get too deep into a color pair, it's very hard to pivot out of it when that color pair or color combination is not open. So yeah, I would, in previous sets, yeah, you would try to start monocolored or in 2 colors. And Aaron has a question too.
Yeah, likewise, I have not drafted a 3-color set before. So I was wondering about the types of decks that you draft in terms of the spectrum from aggro to control. Because my initial thought was like, okay, because you need some time to set up your mana base, you're probably more on the mid-range to control spectrum if you have 3-color decks.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if there is this dichotomy between, your 3-color mid-range to control decks and your 2-color streamlined aggro that try to go under.
Totally, yes.
This,
so
this
one
is something that you should watch, because that may be something you can watch out while you're drafting. If you're saying like, and there are some 3-color cards that look like more aggro cards.
Yep.
Like this 4/2 that has a shield counter on it or something. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, or some of these ones over
Captain,
here, like the
Crew Captain.
Crew Captain, yeah, Crew Captain's a good example.
Indestructible as long as it's entered, not the shield counter. So do 3-color aggro decks work basically, or is there this dichotomy that I described?
I would say it is more of a dichotomy than not. So there is often the 2 drops in this set and previous 3-color sets have been made purposely not so great. And there's exceptions to that. There's definitely good 2 drops, and good 2 drops are likely going to be at a premium because of that. But the way that these sets are designed often is they go, let me give you some time to get your footing under you. You can exile your mana fixing card. Where are they? The common mana fixers. You can exile that from your hand. These guys on turn 2, not get run over by a 2-drop, and then cast your spells. They want people to be able to do that, right? But there is some room for exploitation there for sure, where you can be, like you're saying, say, hey, I'm a 2-color deck here. I can get under you. And yeah, it is on a spectrum. I guess I would say it is. It's not so much just like a gray, black and white, where it's like you are aggro, you're not aggro. There is going to be some. You start, maybe you want to be a 2-color aggro deck. Say we figure out that black red's really good in the format. And you're like, hey, let's start drafting black. I have a good black red start here, and then you realize, ooh, hey, black red's not actually like all that open. Then you probably need to transition into a deck where you're like, okay, I pick up a Crew Captain, or I pick up a Corpus Appraiser, get a little bit more grindy, stuff like that. So it depends on where you start, right? I think often the drafts are going to play out in a way where you're going to want to go, let's take monocolored and 2-color cards early on, right? And it might turn out that the gold cards are so good, the 3-color cards are so good that that's what you want to be doing. Like not playing those 3-color cards here is a big cost. If that's the case, you're going to find the 2-color decks be a lot more rare. But if it's just like, hey, you know what? No, like a good curve in this format is fantastic. It really gets under people, punishes people that are trying to, cast their 3-4 color cards or whatever, 3-color cards of 4 colors. Then yeah, you probably might end up in the spot where you're like, I just want to start 2 colors, and you might have to move to 3 colors if your colors aren't so open, is what it probably comes down to. Okay, so I have a big picture question here, and this is something I've heard a few people talk about in my chat and just in Discord and in general. With the advent of 17 lands, today we're talking about card evaluation. Are card evaluations, especially preset card evaluations, is that still an important skill? Is that something still relevant to becoming a successful strategic leaning Magic player? Are we just offloading everything to 17 lands here? Yeah, from unknown here. Matt, hi.
Hello. Yeah, absolutely, they're important.
Yeah.
17 lands, it provides some context, but it doesn't provide all the context, and that's what it's all about.
Exactly. That's context. That's what it's all about. I need to get that tattooed. Yeah, for sure. Duncan.
Yeah, to me, this is where, in general, you can get the biggest edge against the competition early in the format is have better card evaluation skills than the other players in your pod.
Yep. especially because I think so. This is a bit played down these days because the band or the range of time this happens in is a lot more compressed. But I think back to my favorite times in the set release season or set release cycle are the first week or the first 2 weeks. Before 17 lands, this lasted about 2 weeks, maybe 3, but now it's like 3, 4, 5 days where people don't really know what's happening. Right? People don't really know what they're just jumping into set. Maybe you're gonna have a lot of people who haven't even looked at the set, haven't watched the set review, maybe aren't in tune with content, right? And you, as the informed drafter, you don't even have 17 lands at that point because 17 lands data either isn't reliable or we don't have a lot of it right now. We can have some preliminary stuff, but it's kind of just a wide open sea at that point. And I think in at least historically for me, I've gotten a lot of my equity, my value from that first 2 weeks, build up a collection of gems or tickets or whatever it is, where it's just like, yeah, because I went in thinking about the set, had good set evaluation skills, at least I'd like to think. You get to sweep the competition if you are in tune and maybe get a little bit lucky with the decks you've drafted and the decks you're gravitating towards. So yeah, I think that's a huge point. Aaron, you had a point too.
Yeah, I guess I lowered my hand, but I can still say it. So,
sure.
I think it depends a bit on where you are as a drafter and also how you draft. Like for me, and when you draft, I guess in the first few days, 17 lands data doesn't say anything. Maybe, but even now with comments, like in the first couple days, they're probably already give you pretty good view. So if you're someone who is sort of learning by trial and error more, then for me, it helps me a lot to just look at 17 lands and say, this is roughly good. And then I'll just try and learn the rest by trial and error. And then the other thing is, I think it depends on where you are as a drafter in that, like, I felt like at certain stages in learning how to draft, I don't play Magic that long yet, different things give me more equity. Like sometimes just learning how a draft works gives you more equity and learning how to navigate a draft. Then and other times learning how to play the game properly gives me more equity. And the card evaluation, if I focused on that, wouldn't get me that much farther. And so I think it depends on where you are essentially as a drafter.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think so.
What the answer to that question is.
Yes, no, I'm glad you said that because I think that's a really important point. Yeah, Lionel.
Yeah, as a pretty big novice in gameplay in 17 lands, I'm going to utilize it to look at cards that I'm not sure about. For instance, that cycle that lets you pay 2 and exile it to attach it to a land essentially and fix it. So if that has a low card in hand win rate, then I'll know maybe it's too slow, it's not good enough, and that can really steer you in a direction for the format.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think so. So yeah, I mean, everything everybody said here, I definitely echo. And some other additional thoughts. I think that just like Matt was saying, context is huge. And I think even, you can apply this in a bunch of different ways where let's just say you have a card in a vacuum. And I say, I can tell you, hey, this card is good or this card is bad. Well, let's take, for example, the cards you were just talking about, Lionel, the mana fixers, right? 17 lands is going to come out, it's going to spit out a game in hand win rate, right? But there's going to be certain contexts where those cards are better, those cards are worse. If you've already got lands in your pile, right, you've already drafted some lands, those cards aren't probably going to be as important. I would put those as second-rate fixers, right? Maybe 17 lands rates them pretty highly, but that's maybe because the average drafter isn't taking lands as highly as they need to, right? So if you can break down mechanically why a card is good, and here's my main point here. If you can break down mechanically why a card is good, you're going to do really well for yourself because then you can figure out, hey, where is it good and where is it bad? And this is broadly applicable to not just like this works in Cube too, actually. One of the biggest hurdles for people drafting Cube, I think, is figuring out what makes the difference between a good Cube card and a good normal draft card. They go, oh, this card's pretty good in normal draft. It's probably pretty good in Cube. And if you can identify what makes it good in normal draft, you can figure out, hey, is it good in Cube or not good in Cube, right? Because you can have these set of rules that good Cube cards have these attributes to, and this card doesn't have that or does have that, right? So that's one big thing too, just giant context both in different formats and also where you're drafting, right? And just how you're drafting in, let's just say Streets of New Capenna, given what your cards, what you already have in your pile, that definitely changes the evaluation. And card evaluation skills, I think, are still super important. Yeah, Lab Goat.
Yeah, I think one other card evaluation skill that's probably important to have is just knowing like what cards are in every set or knowing the cards in general. I think it's easy to overlook that. Obviously it's people take for granted that being the first step. But if you're not really sure what you're looking for, you don't necessarily know what pieces am I looking for in the context of this one specific draft, and then also knowing what cards are in just about every set, and that's going to be part of your card evaluation. Say, okay, why is this card better than usual because of the context of the set, or why is it better than usual because of it's got the set mechanic printed on it. For example, we've got the 3/3 that makes a treasure, the jewel thief. Okay, it's a 3/3. 3/3 for 3 is not always that great, but it's got some words on it, and the words are pretty good, and they're good enough to make it probably one of the best cards in the set. So I think that's probably important as well.
Totally, yeah. Seeing the big picture, seeing where the pieces of the puzzle fit. I think that's super important. Yeah, Zach.
You're still muted.
If I can tie together the card evaluation and 17 lands things a little, what Alex was saying about understanding why a card mechanically is good and what makes it tick, I feel like is really important for taking that really, really early data on commons from 17 lands and seeing. I remember something like Tamio's Safekeeping jumping out in Neo and going that's a card that wasn't on my radar at all. It seems to have really good stats. What's the deal with it? But you also couldn't just start first picking it and jam it in your decks and have anything cohesive. But the first time that I flipped a Saga with mana open and then blanked my opponent's whole turn while still developing, it was okay, I get where and when to use this.
Yep, light bulb moment.
And so just finding out of getting your attention drawn to something in the data and then using your card evaluation to figure out when and where to use it seems like a new skill, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like the application of the application almost. And one last thought here too, I think, is kind of figuring out in game. We've been mostly talking about the draft, but figuring out in game when to threat assessment on it, or figuring out what is important in a game based on the context of the game, right? Because often you can look at a card, you can look at a bad card even, and go, okay, that's a bad card. My opponent, I don't care about that. I don't have to worry about that. But ask yourself, why is that card bad, right? For example, let's say it's one of the bad equipment, right? There's quite a few kind of clunky-ish equipment in the set, and your opponent plays a cement shoes, right? And you're like, oh, that you laugh at them, that's kind of funny, right? Why do I have to worry about that thing? But I can imagine a board state where they've got a bunch of 1/1s and the board's kind of stalled out a little bit. And you've got this, maybe you've even got a disenchant in your hand. You're like, oh, I don't want to disenchant that. It's a bad card. And you go, oh, by the way, Cement Shoes is a really clunky equipment. It's gives +3/+3, but taps the creature at their end step and that creature doesn't untap. So it's a really weird, bad equipment on face value. Maybe it turns out good. We'll see. Anyways, they have a bunch of 1/1s and you go, oh, they just start suiting them up, and every turn they're setting in a 4/4 and a 4/4 and a 4/4, and you're like, man, that Cement Shoes is actually pretty good. And then you kind of go, well, the reason Cement Shoes isn't really good generally is because it's clunky, and when tempo matters in a game, you can't spend so much time just suiting up a creature and then locking it down for a turn. But if the board's stalled and they've got a bunch of expendables, hey, that Cement Shoes is actually going to be a problem for you, and maybe you should have just disenchanted it, right? So figuring out that kind of stuff in card evaluation, I think, really, really matters too. And that's going to, that's a very, I think, pointed example. You can point to that and be like, oh, obviously that's a good example. But even there's more subtle versions of that come up in games. Anyways, yeah, any last thoughts on that, or we can move on to, Aaron.
I guess maybe one thing that I found useful, and I heard this maybe at limited level ups, maybe in another podcast, was the idea that for good cards in 17 lands, they're probably always good. If they rate good, but if you know how to card evaluate, you have the skills to figure out why a card has a bad rating but still can be good in certain situations. That sort of goes along with what you're saying.
Yep. Totally.
So I thought this thought I kind of liked it.
Yes, that's a really good point. I'm sure I said it at some point, but I think Sam Black.
Maybe it was Sirkovitz also in some point.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have said that at this point, which is fine. I think it's good to spread around the good information. I think to kind of highlight what you're saying early on, and as the format moves on, it's hard to hide a good card in the data. Often people look at Imperial Oath, right? I think a lot of people early on were trying to explain away Imperial Oath and be like, oh, it must be some anomaly in the data that this is performing so well at 60% win rate. How can that possibly be? And No, it turns out it's really hard to hide a good card in the data, right? It's just gonna rise up because even when people aren't playing it perfectly, it's gonna be good. The opposite of true is for a bad card, right? Something that's like a narrow card that it's gonna be really hard or it's gonna be very easy to obscure the times that card is good because it's got a lot of bad cases. But there might be good cases for the card. There might be times where it's like, hey, in my deck it works out pretty well. Now I would caution against that because I think there is you need some nuance there, you need some kind of like judgment calls on your own part where it's just like, do I really believe it's good in my deck, or am I just trying to convince myself that I'm playing a bad card for synergy purposes? But there are times when that certainly is true. So that's yeah, I think it's very important going into a new set. Okay, let's move into our group activity here. So, you're the card reviewers now. 2 points I want everybody here. And we're going to probably divide into 3 groups, I would say. Find a card, or cards can be, a card you point out as a group or multiple that overperformed. I guess this is for if anybody went to pre-release. But cards that you think are underrated by set reviewers you've heard so far, or the community, the opinions. And then find cards or one or multiple cards that are underperformers / you think are overrated by set reviewers or the community at large. And this is, just take some time, I think, as a group, go through the set, pick out some cards that are like, oh, this could be it, and like maybe talk to, maybe you have cards in mind that you're like, oh, I think this is way better than people think, or I think this is way worse than people think, right? It can just be, it doesn't have to be strong feelings, right? It could just be like, oh, I think it's probably a little bit better. Or yeah, it could be like a super hot take. You're just like, I think this card's great.
20 minutes later.
Going.
It was a tough one, Alex, because it requires you to know what the community is thinking.
Yep.
And also you have different takes with the community.
Yeah, so I actually, it's funny, I actually left it a bit open-ended. I kind of wanted to tie into the card evaluation a little bit, like what you might think people would say, like, this is a powerful card, this is not a powerful card. So it's actually fine either way, if you know or you don't know. So I'm curious to hear.
Maybe we cheated because Scott had the great idea to just pull up your rating.
Oh, my tier list, nice.
So we just took this as the community.
Great, yeah. I mean, what else is it if not?
I was gonna just say every card you had graded F was great.
That's great, Alex. I've heard some people, Alex included, say this card is awesome or this card's awful, but I think it's awesome. Do we have both groups here? We've got, I think so, yeah. Cool.
Almost. They're joining now.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Let's have a little bit of a regroup. So, I'll just choose a group. Let's try Lab Goat's group first. Just give me your thoughts. Big picture, any way you guys want to lay it out. We talked for half an hour, which is great. So I'm sure we have a lot of thoughts to think about. So, let's have it.
So big picture, one of the questions was, how good is Connive? And I'm not actually sure entirely what the community as a whole says, but I think there's a tendency for sometimes you're going to look at a creature and say, oh, I'm not getting a counter on this creature, it's terrible.
Yep.
But it's important to, I guess, value the looting as well. So a couple cards that came up were Psionic Snoop and the Hypnotic Grifter. I wanted to have like a 1-drop that, at least me personally, a 1-drop that I'm like, oh, this card's really good. Everybody else thinks it's only okay. So that's Hypnotic Grifter is going to be the card for that. That's the one that's it's a 1/2. You have the activated ability to spend 3 mana. Costs 1 blue. Spend 3 mana. Hypnotic Grifter connives. And so I think it's been said that there aren't a lot of mana sinks here. This could be a reasonable one. The stats are not huge, but you're putting something on the board, and I think that could potentially be good there. Then we talked about Psionic Snoop. Let me find that one.
And bring it up right here.
I think it was we were just looking at your ratings. You had it as a D. It's the flash 3 mana 0/3 connive when it comes in. It's one of the ones where you're like, well, if you're not getting the counter, it does seem considerably worse, because getting any power can be good. It can shut down a lot of stuff you can either trade it for something, ambush something, ambush their 4-drop that's got a 1 power, and that could potentially be good in the right place, especially if you're getting any value off of the discard.
Totally, yeah. Just imagine your opponent attacks him with a 2/1 on turn, or like a 1/1 on turn 3, and you're just like, all right, flash this in. Like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? You want to remove my 4-1? Go ahead at instant speed. So yeah, no, totally. So let's talk about Connive quickly. So what? I'll give you some. I'm sure some of you have heard some of my thoughts. But what is anybody hot on Connive? Cold on Connive? Big
Something
picture
I
thoughts?
was thinking about that I hadn't thought about while we were talking about it is maybe Connive just lets you be more toolboxy.
Oh,
Maybe-
interesting.
Maybe your Connive decks now lets you play cards like Broken Wings, and if Broken Wings is in a situation, you bin it and you get a benefit from it, and you play a lot more of those cards that might be sideboard cards or might be like so-so cards.
Mm-hmm.
And you could search more also for the card. So a card like Rifter lets you search for the toolbox card you want, and you're getting benefits while you search.
Yeah, it's kind of the we kind of had this thought a little bit with Blood in Crimson Vow a little bit, and it panned out in a way that didn't come up as often because we kind of just wanted to loot away the lands to Blood rather than the spells. But I think it might be, I noted in the set review, I think the point you just brought forth there, me and Ethan were kind of like, not so into it. But now I thought about it a little bit more. The reason we didn't like that so much for Blood was largely put on aggressive cards, right? Connive is largely put on not defensive cards, but slower cards, right? More mid-range cards. So I think there's more space for that kind of thing to happen, where you've got maybe a bit more of a situational card or a situationally powerful card. You can put it in and loot it away when it's bad. I think that might be a bit more of a factor that's present here. Any other thoughts? Big picture thoughts on Connive? So one of the things. Good. Yeah.
Maybe one of the things is also like how the deck building works. Are you gonna be able to get away with 15 land decks? Well, probably not in a 3-color set, but like basically, if you have it all full of Connive, are you getting away with low number of land decks that then let you also discard your spells to get the counters at the same time, or whether that works or not?
You're right. I think on average, it won't. Like, if I had to tell somebody, hey, does Connive affect your land count? I guess yes would be the answer, but I would also put the caveat of I can't broadly tell you yes or no for your given deck, because I think it's really going to matter based on your deck. Like you said, the more cheap Connive you have, the more, yes, I think it's going to affect your land count. You're probably going to want to have a few fewer lands. But I think the more expensive Connive you have, 3 and 4 mana Connive, yeah, you probably can't do that much, right? So yeah, it's going to be a case-to-case basis, I think. But yeah, that's definitely good to think about.
And that's maybe why this is okay actually at a D then, because if this was the cheaper card that let you play fewer lands, it's like here basically, if you have to play a lot of lands, then you want to more often than not discard a land and not get the counter, and then these cards that don't get you a counter or that need a counter to actually be something get worse, right?
Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, so we were actually talking about the card Boon of Safety, the 1 mana instant that gives a shield counter.
Yep.
And I have been kind of theory crafting this like blue-white tempo flyers kind of thing. And basically I could imagine a deck that wants to play 15 lands anyway, because it's all 1 and 2 mana, and then top end is the 2/1 flyer that draws a card. Where you're just growing your creatures, putting counters on it, and then protecting it with cheap tricks and the suit up variant. And in that case, then you do get to regularly get the counters from Connive, but you're not so punished because it's a super low curve deck that wants a low land count anyway.
Right, and you probably, one of the tensions with looting, or Connive, or just looting in general, is that early on, like think about the modern age, when you loot early on turn 2, sometimes you don't always know what you want to pitch. I think if you're building a deck like the one you just described there, like if you're super low to the ground, like you said, top out of 3, maybe have some force in there, you often know, hey, I can pitch my 4th land, I'm not going to really need it. I can operate on 3, it's not going to be a huge deal, right? When you Connive on 2, you have your Raffine's Informant, the 2/1 Connive creature. You can make that a 3/2, right? So yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting space. That's a really good point. I like that.
Yeah, I don't know if it actually comes together, but I can imagine a world in which it does.
Yeah, let's go back just quickly to the Grifter, because so this is the one. With this one that you set it on as probably better than the running thoughts on the card. Is that right? Or was this?
I think so.
Okay, cool. So I agree. Actually, I think maybe I mean myself would probably a little bit too low, and I think the thoughts that the community has had so far in Discord, from what I've seen, are probably a little bit low. And the thing that really got me thinking about this card is just the fact that, like, once you get to 6 mana, this thing kind of just becomes like, you know, you can do it twice per turn. It kind of just becomes this engine. So I think there's 2 points actually: the 3 mana point and the 6 mana point. The 3 mana point, your opponent, you play this on 2, and you leave 3 mana up, maybe to connive, maybe to flash in something, you know, whatever it is. Your opponent can't attack their X2s in, right? So that it kind of acts as this threat of activation X3 blocker. 2/3 really. And that's gonna stop a decent amount of attacks, I would say. Even a 1/2 on turn 2 is gonna either stop a 1/1 attacker or threaten to trade with a 2/1 that they might value. So I think the body is actually a bit is deceptively good. And then once you get to 6, it does just kind of become this thing where you're like, I have to kill that thing, right? Like, they're gonna be able to pull away. I'm trying to think of a card that was like this I feel like there was a card that was like this in Neon Dynasty or maybe the last set, where it's just like, they play it and then you're just like, well, it's not actually card advantage, but man, they're gonna start to run away. It was like maybe there's something that scries each turn or something like that. You're just like, man, I know I'm a dog in this game now, because they're
Almost
just gonna
like
be
a
able.
network terminal when you
Yeah.
were.
Yes, that was it. Network terminal. That's exactly what it was. Network terminal, right? They have network terminal. You don't. I think that's gonna be how Hypnotic Grifter feels. And yes, it's a different class of cards. That's a mana fixer. This is a creature. And this gets killed more easily. But at the same time, this provides a bit more early game value. So yeah, I actually like this as a take or as a pick for probably a little bit underrated currently.
Yeah, even with the Psionic Snoop, I think people are also underestimating the amount of X1s there are in this format.
Yes, I agree.
Compared to other things. So Psionic Snoop is often going to be you win a combat and you get this 1/4 body. And you got a loot out of it.
I also think just the inherent act of the loot. Like, I think a lot of people are worried about, oh, do you get the counter? Do you not get the counter? I think people are gonna feel the just the power of looting every turn is really, really nice. Being able to not get flooded as often, being able to, like, when you don't pitch a spell. I think a lot of people are looking at these connive cards and going, the win condition or the win case here is, I say, I've gotten the counter on my card. Maybe I've looted away a weird situational card, or I pitch my Raphine's Guidance or whatever. But I think a win state or a win case for this is just, you pitched a card you didn't need. You pitched a land. You drew into a spell. That's really good, right? So I think in a vacuum, they're just pretty good. And like you said, Scott, when you do get to ambush the thing with this kind of card, I think you're going to feel really good. So I think it's hard to imagine what the game states look like where each mode is good, but as you are in the game, it's going to be very apparent, and you're going to be like, oh, that one feels good. Oh, I should do that. I should do this. This one feels good. So yeah, I think there's a lot of power in this, in Connive. Great. Anything else from that group, or you want to hear from the other group now? If you
We
had
also
some.
talked about treasure as a mechanic and how good that is.
Yes.
You had Glittermonger really low, and also about the X1s, Glittermonger will be a body that can eat an X1 pretty effectively. And in 3 colors, when we were talking about the fixing that might not all be there, this also can solve that problem, although a bit slow. And then we also talked about prize fight with the treasure it creates, and if that's being an underthought of extra bonus to the fight spell.
Right. Prize fight.
So these were two cards I think you had as D's, and we thought maybe were a bit better. Maybe,
So
this one you had a D plus.
I think Glittermonger specifically is one that I can buy because there's going to be decks where treasure, you're saying treasure is very good inherently. I agree with that. There's going to be decks where the act of creating a treasure almost feels like drawing a card in a lot of spots. Not exactly, but you're going to be able to use it as a resource for something, right? Rather than be your stimulus package or, whatever it is. So I think there are going to be times when this feels, especially, when you face this, you're like, oh my gosh, they're just going to be able to pump out a treasure each turn. That's just a nightmare. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I might be underrating it a little bit as a D for sure. My hesitation of the card is just that it's without the treasure, and maybe you can't divorce the two, but I'm just thinking this is like the 4 mana. We've seen this card before. The 4 mana tap, add a color, mana of any color. Those are tended to underperform, and maybe this just making a game permanent is enough better. That really puts it over the top. I could totally buy that. The fight spell. Oh, go ahead. You had something?
Yeah, I agree that I think this is probably better than the fight spell. What we were theory crafting with this was, what if the decks that want Glittermonger are decks that just want to stall the board a bit, then they can cast their big, flashy, multicolor cards, even go into a fourth color. And Glittermonger is kind of the glue that ramps them to that and gets to that point.
That is something I definitely can buy. So just like this is the glue card for a 4 or 5 color deck. I think that is very, because this is a repeatable 5 color resource and there's not that many of them in this set. So yeah, I can totally get behind that. Prize Fight scares me a little bit because the treasure, while I like it, I think it's more of an incidental upside than anything else. So I think this rate of 2 mana fight instant speed has almost never been good. Like it's been okay situationally in certain game states, but like think back to the one from Midnight Hunt, right? I can't remember, Fight for Dominance or something. The one that put a counter if you had Covenant. That card had the ability to, you had the potential to put a counter on it, and even then, it wasn't an amazing card. And I just looked back at all the versions of this card, and none of them have impressed. So while I agree the treasure is a big part of this, I think that the baseline of it is probably a little too sketchy for my taste. Like, you know, going in, right? I'm not saying it's necessarily, but that's my thoughts on the card. I don't know if you guys had any particular thoughts, you know, other than that. Okay, cool. Let's talk about the other group here. What did the other group have? What did you guys talk about?
Well, in the realm of you know, 4 and 5 color splashy decks that take advantage of treasure, I already talked a lot. Duncan was really high on this too, but Big Score, we both really liked Big Score as kind of a glue card.
Yeah, okay. Oops, scared.
So I made the comparison to Sam Black drafting Theros Beyond Death, where he was drafting all of the, I still can't remember what the card is.
Thrill of Possibility?
Thrill of Possibility, okay.
There you go.
It's like on the tip of all of our tongues.
Yeah.
Figure it out. Right, so he was using that as a way to like filter and like fix in his 5 color decks, and this card does it, but it also like makes you treasure, which is exactly what you want to be doing. So yeah, Zach and I were talking about this as maybe like an important enabler for your multicolor good stuff decks.
Yeah, so now we've kind of seen 2 treasure 5 color enablers at 4 mana here, right? Big Score and Glittermonger. So that's actually a question I have going in. Like, what is the flavor of the red-green deck? Because it's like a little beat down-ish, but also I think not that beat down. The green cards don't beat down that well. I mean, we've seen this a lot recently where it's like the green cards don't beat down that well. The red card wants to beat down. They don't play all that well together. So I think maybe it's going to be just like, you could have the red as a support color for the cheap interaction that it provides, like strangles and stuff, plus the green mid-rangey stuff. I think, and of course, Big Score playing a part there. That's what red contributes. So yeah, I think this leads, at least for me, into that bigger picture question of like, what is red-green as a color pair / family? You know, the 2 families it provides to you. What are they actually doing, right? Like what is the classic Magic archetype I can see them slotting into? And I'm not sure just yet, but Big Score could play a part in that. And yeah, what was anything else?
Yeah, we had a bunch of hits. We talked about a lot of stuff.
Sweet, yeah, let's hear it.
And you know, please somebody from my group chime in and you know, mention the other stuff that we talked about, because my memory is not that good. But,
yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. So we also talked a little bit, or I brought up some questions about Crooked Custodian, the 2 mana black 2 mana 3/2 enters the battlefield tapped. Not that I'm necessarily saying this card is good, but in the conversation of 2 drops being bad in this format and wanting to do dirtily things, this is a great way for black decks to just be like, all right, I'm attacking you for 3 on turn 3, and then, you know, deal with my aggression.
Yep. I think I am probably slightly higher on the card than I was before, considering the conversation we had and just like the thoughts I've had lately of, yeah, the 2s kind of suck and people might be just taking turn 2 off a lot of the time, right? So like this is just in that space of like a red-black aggro deck where you can really punish people for, you know, not really affecting the board until turn 3. So yeah, I can buy that too, especially with a card like Strangle. Like anytime you have a cheap interaction spell backing up a clock, that really, really helps, right? Going like 1/2 Strangle on 4 plus a 3-drop, like that's a huge. Like we saw this a little bit in Red Black in Neon Dynasty, where it was just like, all right, you've got Voltaic Surge and Kami Fair player, where you just like play 1, play 2, play a 3. Where even though removal spells weren't very good as a class of cards, or were less good as a class of cards in Kamigawa, those removal spells were fantastic in those red or red-black aggro decks. So they just like, as soon as your opponent's creature came off of suspend, their Saga flipped, it's like, nope, that can't block. Sorry, that's dead. You know, you spent all this time investing in this, all this time equity in your Saga, and it's like, nope, that actually can't block. You were planning on that to block. Sorry. So yeah, cheap removal really actually is a big boon to aggressive decks, and especially when you have threats like this to back it up. So yeah, totally can buy it.
As a corollary to that, the 1-mana red enchantment that gives menace.
Yeah, I was hoping somebody would talk about that. Yeah,
maybe that works well with this card as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is one that this is like the number one card. I have no clue how good it is. Like absolutely, I've literally the past few days I'm like, oh, it's trash, and then I was like, maybe it's great, and then I'm like, oh, maybe it's just trash again. And then different people whose opinions I respect, like Ari Lax and NCAA. Like Ari was like, yeah, I think the card's trash, and NCAA is like, I think the card's awesome, and it's just like I don't think anybody really knows exactly how good it is and how good it's gonna feel. But yeah, I think. One of the things that made me tepid on it, or I'm like, I'm not so into it, is there's the gold, the hound, right? Let's just look at here. There's the 1-mana 1/1 menace creature. Putting that on that is okay, but you lose out on the menace. Same with this guy, the gold hound. Right. Same with the 2-drop, the good 2-drop, right? The where is it here? The blitz creature. Oh, it's probably at the top here because
Mayhem Patrol.
Yes, Mayhem Patrol. That's the one. Let's just find it here. Yeah, Mayhem Patrol, same thing happens, where it's just like, okay, well, that's a good, putting on a cheap creature, but you lose it on the menace. I think what I often want to pair a menace aura with is a high power creature, like that 3/2. So yeah, I can totally get behind that. Yeah, anything else? Maybe we'll do one more before we close out here.
I think, Duncan, I think you brought up Dapper Shieldmate, and not that it's a great card, but it brought up 2 points where, we were talking about Shield being better than we expected. And also the fact that even if your opponent trains a shield counter for a 1/1, we were talking about that might be enough where it's decent enough to take them off casualty. And it's, not unplayable. It's not an amazing card, but it really brought up the discussion of shield being decent. And, even trading the shield for a 1/1 is good enough. And then you have the 4/2.
I really want to compare this card to the Eswald Shield Basher from Vow, which, I know that like Ethan and Alex, you guys were kind of high on that card in the set review, and that turned out not being good. Just paying the 1 mana when it attacks was kind of a cost.
Right.
This card, you don't have to pay the 1 mana, so it caught my eye as like, one of these similar but maybe good enough to, or like slightly, like one of these cards that's slightly better than versions we've seen before. And there's always that breaking point where at some point it's actually good enough to play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've seen that time and time again in the past little while where it's just like, they're twisting the knobs and trying to actually make every version of every effect playable to some degree. So yeah, no, I totally think that, like, shield counters is another big question for me, where I'm just like, exactly how good are these, right? How I don't have a great answer, right? I can't pinpoint it, just being like my gut says pretty powerful, but they could also just turn out to be like, not that big of a deal. So that's going to be something that I think all the shield counter cards, I think another good example is, let's see here. There's an uncommon, don't remember what it's called. It's the one that comes in with a shield counter and it attacks and gives something flying. That one I'm like, that could be really good, or it could just feel like not that amazing, right? And that's what I'm not exactly sure how to rate. Let's see if I can find it here, or if anybody remembers the name of it. Is this I guess it's a shield counter card, so it'd be up here. Let's see. No, let's just go. Oh, there it is. A winged shield agent. Yeah, this guy over here, right? Like, we've seen versions of this card, white versions of this card, and those have been pretty good, where they jump a creature, but this does it maybe only one time. And yeah, so I'm not sure. Jury's out, I think. All right, so let's wrap us up here. Any hot takes? Any takes anybody has that you maybe were too tepid on sharing and just want to put it out there for the world? Maybe we already covered them though. Any last thoughts?
I had a minor hot take.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So I haven't been keeping up with this discussion around the new set at all. So I've recently been looking over the set, and then talking with my group mates helped me kind of understand what people are thinking a little bit. But so I said, without any real context, that the we're talking about the 2 mythic commons. There's the
Jewel Thief and the Inspiring Overseer. Yeah,
that card's ridiculous.
Oh, this is a hot take, and I like it.
One, and I thought the green one is a little bit overrated from what I've heard.
You know what? I think that's not that much of a hot take. I agree. No, I think there was I think the question is like, oh, which is better, the white one or the green one? I think the white one's a lot better, honestly. Like a lot better.
Late in the game, when you play the green one, as my group mates pointed out, like that it doesn't have that much of an impact. It's probably not getting through the board. On turn 10, when you play the white one, your opponent's like, oh my god.
Yeah,
Like,
well, that's
that thing's
like
drawing them a card, stabilizing the board, and it's killing me. Like
it's like, oh man, you top decked me with this awesome bomb, but it's really just a common, right? It's just, you're gonna have that feeling. No, yeah, I think so. On curve, I actually wonder which is gonna have the higher game in hand win rate. It might be the green one. I don't think that's crazy. It also could also just be the white one because it's also just busted good. Yeah, I think that the white one, if you compare the two, I think the white one is a lot better. I still think the green one's quite good, but I do also think it's not on, it could fall just under the, oh, this is busto tier. Yeah. Not a ridiculous take. Anybody else as we close out here?
We had a couple more cards we talked about in our group. One of them was Quick Draw Dagger.
Yeah.
This is a 3-mana colorless equipment with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you can put it on one of your creatures. That one gains first strike until end of turn, and it gets +1/+1 as equip ones. Basically, you're getting a short sword, and you're getting a first strike combat trick. So getting first strike is probably a little better than usual in this set. You've got a lot of, again, a lot of high power, low toughness creatures. So maybe they block your menace thing, or you block theirs, and you're killing that thing. Probably a little more often than usual. The question is whether or not is short sword going to be good? Is 3 mana too much to leave up? But if it's reasonable, then this could be like, are you going to want to third pick this to stay open? Maybe not, but I feel like it may be a card to, we were thinking it's a card to look out for, that maybe something you can pick when you're not sure what direction to go.
So it plays pretty well with, if we're talking about a red-black aggro deck, it plays pretty well with both the 2-drops, like the red 2-drop and the black 2-drop. I mean, there's a few 2-drops in each color, but the menacing one and the 3-power one, like, first strike plays well on both high-power creatures and menace creatures, so maybe there's something there. Yeah, I can see that.
And another card we talked about was Stimulus Package, and we just kind of wanted to discuss that one, whether or not we said that it's... so I feel like... what did we say? That I think somebody said Limited Resources said that they rated it as a D.
I think this is the one where like I was me and Ethan were the furthest, or like me and Ethan compared to Lords Limited or Limited Resources. We were like, we gave it like a B, and then they gave like a D. So I'm curious to see where this one lies. Yeah. Did you guys have thoughts on if this was good or bad?
I think it's garbage. I think it costs at least one more than it should.
Right.
Like it's by itself, it's a bad like a really bad raise the alarm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as a best case scenario, I'm trying to think now that we're just talking about Glittermonger. So if Glittermonger said tap, make a 1/1. With this, that'd be good, right?
Yeah.
That'd make Glittermonger good, but would it make having both cards good, right? And then I still don't know. I think it's at least one too expensive. You're taking it, looks like at least a tempo dump, and you have to have some way to keep your board stable. If the format is really slow, I could see it being good.
I will say one thing I really don't like that it doesn't play well in multiples.
Right. Yes, agree.
And I feel like if this is like an uncommon builder around enchantment, I want to be able to like go like, ooh, I picked up 3 of them, and now I can really go off because I'm going to draw one reliably. But then when you play the second one and you're like, oh, I just made 2 1/1s for 4 mana.
Yeah, you're like, oh, great top deck.
That's a really good point. Actually, this card looks a lot like the Hot Springs to me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you actually don't want to play this card.
Interesting. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
If it was whenever you sacrifice a treasure, make a 1/1, it would be busted. I would drink all of them, because then you just pile up multiples and it'd be like Anvil kind of.
Yeah.
But
the second one helps me cast my overrun.
Exactly. There you go. Yeah. There you go.
But so like I would play the red, the go. Can't remember any of the card names. Big Score.
Yeah,
I would take Big Score over this, I think, in a lot of cases.
Right. Yeah, and I think to be fair, if we're gonna appeal to majority here, I think me and Ethan and I guess Ben are actually the only people I've heard that even like this card at all. So I wouldn't be shocked if we were just wrong on this one. All right, we're going to wrap up the class. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. It was an awesome class. Hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed this. Of course, I have to give a quick shout out to Patrick. Patrick is the education consultant who helps me plan these classes each week. If you or anybody out there watching on YouTube has any use for an education consultant, or you know somebody who's looking for an education consultant, I cannot recommend anybody better than Patrick. He is awesome to work with. I'm going to post his, there's links to his email in the description. You can contact him there. And yeah, that's about it. Everybody else who's in this class, once again, thank you for hanging out. But also, if you would like to join this class, if you're watching out there on YouTube, check out the Patreon. There's a Patreon tier for joining this class, and it's a pretty reasonable price for, you know, weekly class discussions. I do think you get a lot out of the actual being here in this class. So if you're interested, check it out. Patreon.com/limitedlevelups. There's a bunch of other reward tiers over there. It's the best place to support this channel and the content on it. And yeah, we'll see you next time.